Hello. Welcome to Friday's office hours with Tracy Lenz. I am a petroleum engineer. I am the owner of Pecan Tree Incorporated now. It used to be Pecan Tree Oil and Gas. I'm training myself not to say that because that is not our new name. We're just Pecan Tree Inc. now. And we do mineral oil and gas valuations, anything oil and gas related in terms of just putting a dollar value to it, whether it's for estate tax, selling, buying, managing your properties, whatever you need it for. So that's what we do. We have a website, pecanestimate.com, and we're here answering your questions. So we have, questions that are sent to us throughout the week. And I wanted to have a place where if someone wanted to come on here and ask any questions they could, and then I can also have an easy way to get answers to those questions out to y'all that doesn't require me filming a video or writing out an hour-long email, because that's usually what I end up doing. I'm trying to be a little more efficient, answer questions all at the same time. So with that, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. And I am taking them today, and I missed one last week, so I'll be hitting that one. I was told afterwards that I missed it, so I'll be hitting that one, and then I'll start with ones that we previously got throughout the week, and then just as you get them, I can answer them. So okay, and then hopefully this week my dog actually stays relatively quiet. So Crystal runs the show. I'm just here living here. Okay, so first question. Actually, last week I did a little snapshot into what oil and gas commodity prices were doing. So I wanted to do that again this week, just so you could see like how quickly they move and don't move, and what they're doing long term. So we're going to hop over to that real quick. So this was pulled about 30 seconds ago. We have the solid line here is as of today, what prices were and are expected to be. And the solid green is oil, red is gas. That's just industry convention. Because historically, if you found gas, it wasn't great. And so they, green is good, red is bad. And so that's how convention went. Now, right now, Henry Hub this is all based at Henry Hub, which is a point in Louisiana. It's actually like a place, the Henry Hub, trading hub, you want to think of it, is actually a place where oil and gas, or where natural gas is traded. And that is what the value that is trading at as of, it's a 327. So, markets haven't closed yet today. So this is yesterday's value, the spot that it closed for. So if you think of it like stock, how there's an opening and a closing value for stock that's publicly traded. The same thing happens for oil and gas and any commodity. So like gold, some reason all I can think of right now is gold, but other commodities are there's a long list of commodities that are traded. And so we have natural gas at Henry Hub is $3.92, and that's dollars per million BTUs of energy. So you're probably used to hearing about it in so MMBTU is the British thermal units is the abbreviation for that. you're probably used to hearing it more in like cubic feet or something more not energy related. So that's just a different gas has different heating value, so that gets it down to the same and more apples to apples. But a typical, it's about 1,000 1,000 MCF is about equivalent to 1,000,000 BTUs in terms of a normal natural gas unit, and so that's why 392 for 1,000,000 BTUs is about the same as 392 for 1,000 cubic feet of gas. So it's a 1-to-1 thing. So you can roughly think of it as 392 for 1,000 cubic feet of gas. So if you're looking at your statement and it says that your well produced that much cubic feet of gas, then, or 1,000 cubic feet, then the M in our industry, we like to use say the M is the thousands. So that convention, that M equals 1,000. So 2 M's is million. Again, we just, like to make things as complex as possible. But yeah, that's more than you wanted to know about that. But so here we're at 392 for gas and 69.90 for West Texas Intermediate oil. So that's the crude oil that's a certain type of benchmark oil that is based in West Texas. That is what that one is trading for. And then everything adjusts up and down on that one too. So how light or how heavy the oil is, how much, if it's sweet or if it's sour, which means if it has H2S, like the rotten egg smelling stuff in it. If it has a lot of H2S in it, then it's sour. If it doesn't, it's sweet. So different things can make the oil worth more or worth less to that benchmark, the same as different things can make gas worth more or less against that benchmark. So this is the standard that we just use as the industry. And then there's a dashed line underneath it. And this is what happened last week versus this week. So about in 7 days of time. So when I pulled it for last week's video versus when I pulled it today, that's the change. So we are slightly above what was expected to happen. The rest of, if I make this a little bigger, what March was expected to close at, we're a little bit above that, but I mean everything else is trending really close to it, and maybe $1 above long term what was expected to be the long term last. Maybe that's probably not even $1. That's probably like 50 cents or so. I didn't look at the exact number, but it's so this long term is what you're really looking for mineral, what's affecting the mineral values. It's the long term trend. So yes, the next year is important, but what's happening the next 3 years, 4 years really is what's driving oil and gas commodity prices or values for properties. So that's what we're looking at to see if there's any big movers there. So if you bought something in November for gas, I bet the trend probably is a bit different than it is today. So that's what we're comparing. Okay. The next, I guess the first actual question. This is the one that I missed last week, so I apologize. I had, it was brought to me like right afterwards that I just let it like go up in the chat and just completely missed it. So I'll go ahead and tag this person in this video that we're covering it today. Last week was more of a in-depth answer on a single question. There were some other questions handled in there, but it was let's take a common question with a lot of background and really dig deep into it. So if you want to check out what we did last week, that's all the lives are available for replay. So hello, I bought overriding interest in oil and gas properties, never get paid. What do I need to do? So in this case, an overriding royalty interest, ORRI, is typically where you see the acronym for this, and just I can't help but like try to write stuff down when I'm talking, so I'm just gonna have text going here. So this is what we're talking about here, ORRI, overriding royalty interest. And this is when the mineral owner leases to the person who wants to actually drill the well. And then the person who got the lease then carved off a little portion of those royalties as a separate thing from the people who are actually paying the money. So there's like several layers of what's happening right now. And this is typically, so it sounds like you purchase this from, a lot of times these things are sold at auction houses, and they're usually very small, like slivers that are taken on top of deals in order to provide payment to the geologists, the engineers, the landowners, the landmen, the lawyers, like anyone involved in the deal. That's sometimes how they get paid. And so they'll put together the package, and then they'll say, okay, well, this person, this person, this person all get an override, and then we're going to like sell this lease to Chevron or someone to drill. And so an overriding royalty interest is very similar to a royalty interest in a, say you're a mineral owner and you have a royalty that's being paid, except that it only pays out if there's actual producing wells, while mineral owners can get lease bonuses also. And then it's tied to the lease, specifically the lease. And so if that lease stops producing and expires because there's terms that hold that lease, then that override goes away because that override is tied directly to that lease. So if we take an example, let's say that, how do we want to do this? We'll take we'll just zoom in on an area, and that way I can point to specific wells. So again, this is our free website. Feel free to go in and look at what's going on yourself. Let's just pick a random area that I am pretty gosh darn certain there's going to be wells. Yeah, here we go. So here we have these Rocker barbecue wells. It's probably, BQ wells. And I'll toggle this off just to make it easier to see. Oh, y'all can't see what I'm doing. Let's switch to this one. There we go. Okay. So I am zoomed in on just an area, and I'm going to pick down here actually. Okay, so let's say that there was an overriding royalty interest in this section. So each one of these gray blocks are sections. So let's say that you had an overriding royalty in something that was defined as section 215 in abstract A633. And my overriding royalty. And we're just going to keep it here, and we'll call it a day with all the default stuff. So let's say you had that overriding royalty. That is, you don't know if it exists or not. You just picked it up, and we'll take it as you bought it from an auction site. You have a deed in hand saying that you owned an override in this section. Okay, how do you know if you need to get paid and who should be paying you? So what we're going to do is check in and say, okay, there are these wells. I don't know what they're doing. And then these long, thin ones are also, that's the horizontal of the well. You can think of it like a French drain, an underground French drain for the reservoir, where it's that whole wellbore is open to the reservoir. And so this entire point here is something that is draining the reservoir. So for everything inside this box, you have potential points of selling of oil of this well, this well, this well, this well, and then these long, thin horizontals. So if we zoom in and look at a little more detail of this, I'm just going to go ahead and get the this going, purchase it, and return. go back to that particular track we were looking at. And we'll go in there. Okay. So what you can do is look on a map and see who the operator is. Now, depending on which state you're in, and it wasn't said which state this particular interest in was, but every state has a requirement to know who is operating that well. So the first thing to know is who operates any of the wells inside that acreage. So we provide that here, which is why I plugged it into here. So there's currently no active wells. So, well, it's building. Should be done building in a second. But let's zoom in on the full map again. You need to figure out who is operating those wells and what their status is. So we have the active wells are green. So these horizontal wells are active based on our status right now. And then any of these open circles, like where they're not filled in with a solid color, means that it's not active in terms of, so that we have the horizontal wells and the vertical wells. They're just easier to display differently. And so we have them displayed slightly different, but we do see that there's these kind of cleared out areas here on the map are where those wells are. And so if we switch to the normal map, as we call it, that's where these dots are, or where those cleared out parts of the grass are. So we know that they are there, or were there at some point. We hop back. That is telling us that there were wells here. So, but they are not currently producing. So what we now know two things. There were wells that are no longer producing, and there's new wells that are currently producing. And the reason this is important is because if we go to the, let's check out the well info page. It knows when I'm presenting live. It knows. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so if we're on this well page that tells us all the wells that have ever produced on this acreage. And these are all the possible wells and the current wells. So if we go to monthly revenue right now, oh, did it switch properties? Well, this, I might have to go take a different route to this, but oh no, it didn't. Okay. So it didn't switch properties. Okay. So we're able to see which wells are currently producing and which ones aren't. So remember those were like the barbecue wells is what we called them. I don't see those as producing anymore. And I'm betting that they are plugged. And so let's see, do we see? Yeah, well, the point of where I'm going with this is that if those older wells aren't producing, then we know that there was a time where they were, and that if that lease was established when those wells were producing, and then those wells stopped producing, then that lease could have expired, and there might be a new lease. So the first step is to figure out which wells your lease is associated with that you're getting paid on, and looking at the history, like the well history, and which wells are associated with that. So we have the spud date, first production, last production. And you can also go to the state websites and find this information. We're just collecting it for easy access here. And then figuring out if there was a gap in that last production to now, that's how you would know if there was a new lease that needed to be established. And you look at when the lease that you purchased the interest in would have been established, and see if yours is part of the old one or the new one. Now, let's say that there was no gap, and there's just you just know that there's the override, you have no reason to think that it stopped being active, then you can look at which wells are producing. And there's a couple different operators in this area. So there's Permian operating and there's SEM. And for this particular area, there's a couple different, this Meyer allocation and the Tyler, Mayer. Mayer and the Tyler are the two main wells on this property, and those are operated by Permian. And so I would start there. All these other ones have less than a 1% overlap. So the unit factor is how much that well is on top of your acreage. And so this 36% here means that those are the most likely wells here. And this is saying that if you were getting paid, you'd be getting paid about $14. We just plugged in very generic 1 acre type of assumptions in this. So you'd want to plug in what you actually had, but then you at least know what you're chasing down. And how you go about it is you would let the operator know. So this Permian Resources, you'd go to, and I can even show an example. You'd say Permian Resources, royalty owner, owner relations. And you can do this for any company. You just search royalty owner relations, and it should tell you like who to contact, what email, what phone number. If you have just like, they usually have, depending on the size of the company, is how much information they'll have on these sites. But you can at least usually find an email or a phone number to contact, and you would let them know, hi, I own this interest. You would send whatever you purchased that you think that you have interest in, you would send that to them and say, I have this thing that I purchased that makes me believe I have interest in these wells. Can you help me out to figure out why I'm not getting paid and what I would need to do in order to get paid? So provide as much information as you can in this email to them, and that will help them get a head start. If you're not able to even find it on a map, then that's a different story entirely. So this, like if you bought it and you're not able to find it, then you'd want to start with just finding the wells and figuring out if they're still producing or not, and go from there. Okay, that's probably enough on that one. We might not go the entire time this time. And now I'm starting to get a little, oh no, I did check. Okay. It's a rainy Friday here in Austin. I don't know where you are, but it's kind of a lazy day here. So I can understand why everyone's just, chilling out. We have some of our staff is on vacation, and the rest of us are catching up on sleep, and working on all the projects that we're working on. So yeah, it's kind of a quiet day today. Except for my dog. She insists on this not being a quiet day. She is not happy with the rain. So, okay. The next question, let me stage which one I'm going to do. Yeah, we'll do this one. Okay. Again, I really appreciate any place that you want to put these questions. I understand people, find us through many different ways. So I really appreciate these kind words. It really helps making do this a lot easier. So thank you so much. So like others, so she writes, I assume this is a woman. She writes, I am so grateful to find you. Like others, we, 5 of us, found out recently that we inherited NPRI from my great-grandmother. We were informed by Texoma for Intera Resources. There are 4 wells in Tyler County, West Virginia. All have started producing in 2011 and 2022. Are NPRIs bought and sold? We haven't started getting any royalties, but a cousin and I have been, as amateurs, trying to learn about and find everything we can. There are so many acronyms and terms we've been forcing ourselves to learn. Anyway, thank you. You're welcome. So yes, there are so many acronyms that is 100% true. The when I first started in the industry, so this little camera angle is weird for me. Let's switch to this. So when I first started in the industry, I had to get this little like field notebook, and I just put little tabs on it, A through Z. And every time I heard an acronym, I wrote down like what the acronym was and what it meant. And then I was working for Chevron, and they actually have a acronym database called Chaos. So Chevron is an acronym for Chevron acronym online. So I can't remember exactly what it stands for anymore, but it's called Chaos. So that was pretty funny. But yeah, there's a lot, and they're all unique to our industry, so I completely understand. So an NPRI, we covered this a little bit a couple office hours back, and so I will link to that below. But a NPRI is a non-participating royalty interest. So it means that somebody else is handling the leasing of the minerals, and you're just the beneficiary of what they're doing. So, oh, hello, Crystal. Hi. You're bored, huh? She's very bored. Okay. So the NPRI is you're non-participating, and that just means that you are not participating in the leasing and the management of the minerals. You are only a beneficiary of the royalties. So usually oh my goodness. Usually there's some type of percentage NPRI that you're granted in the deed, and so maybe you have 1/64th of a 1/8 of a 1/8 royalty. And so like last week there was a couple different fractions that were happening, and that's very typical for non-participating royalty interests. Are they bought and sold? Yes, they like everything in this industry that can be bought and sold. They are 100% bought and sold. They are typically treated like any other property. So if you buy and sell, you have to file with the courthouse of the place where those minerals and royalties are located. So in this case, there's 4 wells in Tyler County, West Virginia. So at the Tyler County courthouse is where all those documents would need to be recorded and filed. And each state is a little different on how they handle it and the exact rules around that. But most states act like a first come, first serve, first person to file that they own it. And then there's a chain of, okay, well, who did they get it from? Who did they get it from? Who did they get it from? To prove that they even bought it in the first place. Hi, Jacob. How are you? So I get to use my little chat doohickey thing here. A lot to process. Happy you're doing this. Thank you. Yes, this is all a lot to process. That's why we're up to this. So they're bought and sold. NPRIs are bought and sold the same way that like houses are, investment properties, cars, trading baseball cards. Stamps, like whatever, anything you can buy and sell, this is traded and sold the same way. It's probably worse than those other things that I mentioned because there's not there's not as much of an auction house as there are for like stamps or like I bet you could sell minerals on eBay, and I'm almost 100% sure that somebody has. I know that they've been bought and sold on Facebook, like Facebook Marketplace and Facebook groups. I know they've been bought and sold on like online forums, and there's clearinghouses and EnergyNet. So EnergyNet is an oil and gas clearinghouse, or some of the older, not older. I mean, EnergyNet isn't that old, but Energy Domain is another place where things are bought and sold like this. But yeah, they're definitely bought and sold. Let's see. The second part of the question is, just trying to learn about everything we can. So very similar to the last question. If you go and find those wells and you now know who are operating them, so informed by Texoma for Antero resources. So I'm guessing usually when people, and I'll hop back to the question just so we can have it up. Usually when people are told that they own something, that usually means that that person is researching it because they either want to buy it or they're wanting to lease it or they're wanting to drill it. So there's usually something going on right there for them to let you know about it. And I bet they were letting you know about it because there was like an offer involved with it. I get that quite often where people will get an offer and they're like, is this even real? I didn't even know about this. This seems like a Nigerian prince is trying to offer me money. Usually if they're finding you and telling you about this, there's probably something to that, because it's not cheap to go through that effort and do all that research and take that time to put into finding people. So you're not just going to be finding people randomly. And then if they bought something from you, it's on them to know that the title is correct, because you can, like, assuming that you're signing the right type of title. So I wouldn't necessarily sell anything that you didn't know you owned, but if it's real or not, that's the question we're asking right here. So it's probably real, and the best place to find more information is from the operator of those wells. So if you're very, very nice and you summarize all the information you have, say, here are all the things that I know, here's all the reasons that I think I own this, here's, maybe you're even getting paid and you just know nothing about why you're getting paid. A lot of times you can email them and say, here's everything I know, here's my owner number. If you are getting paid, the check should have an owner number on it. That really helps them link you to whoever, to their system. So your owner number, who you are, what names you're related to, like who did you get it from? If you know, so in this case, inherited from her great grandmother. So if she were to contact Antero, assuming that Antero was the one operating the wells. Now, actually, we don't actually know that Antero is the one operating these wells. It just says she was informed by them. And I'm assuming Texoma was working for Antero. But let's just go with it and keep assuming that. You'd want to include your great-grandmother's name and any other names that it might have passed down to between her and you. So if like your grandmother, your mother, like anyone that could be questioned if that title is theirs, maybe if there's a trust name or an estate name, if she put it in the, Sally Mae Smith life estate of 2003, like be very specific on the exact name of the estate, because especially some of these names have very common estate names. Like I think I know of at least 5 different Smith family partnerships, like LLCs, trusts, like the Smith family, any of those more common names, I would make sure to put as much information as possible. And then the division order analysts and the royalty owners, royalty relations folks on the operator side, they're super duper busy. So this is not something that, I would expect like quick turnarounds for, but a lot of times they can like go in their system, take a quick snapshot of what they know about the property and send it back and let you know, at least for your little like piece of it, like this is why we're paying you because of this interest here. And they probably won't have time or be able to explain it fully, but at least you'll have a little more information that you can start hunting down. And then also the people that you're informed by, ask as much questions from them too. So a lot of times if they're trying to buy it, they have all that research, and the good buyers will be willing to share that research with you because it's in their best interest to get you on board as fast as possible. So, that I'm assuming that this is not the the biggest interest ever, so they probably don't have the most reason to spend a ton of time on it. But at the same time, if their work goes nowhere, like that's even more of a waste of time, right? So they have an interest in at least trying to see if this lead goes somewhere by helping answer your questions. So I would try to get as much information from the industry as possible, like lean on those two things. And then if you see that it's actually worth something, if you see that there's a reason to do more research beyond what they can provide, that's when you start bringing in the experts and the people that cost you money to do the research. Because there's a lot of stuff you can like figure out on your own and lean on the industry. But yeah, it's a lot. I really, really applaud the owners that have to go through this, and there's such a wide range of situations and scenarios, and there's never a situation that you can just Google and said, what do you do when you inherit these particular wells with this particular company? If you happen to find another person that has those particular wells with that particular company, it's like a coincidence. And so it's not something you're going to find a YouTube video explaining exactly what to do for those wells, because you're probably the only person that has ever had that particular issue, because that combination of that owner, that operator, those wells, like current technology, you're probably the only person that's run into that. So then you're having to piece together, okay, well, this person did this person did this site recommends this site recommends this, but it's for a different state. And piecing it all together, it takes a long time. And so trying to make that more simple for owners, but also, yeah, kudos to y'all who are putting in the time and effort to research that. Okay. So I'm going to just do... there's a market value question that came in last week, but it's kind of more involved, and I don't think I'm really feeling going into like market value basis things on today's stream. So I think we'll just make this a real chill Q&A. So if you have Jacob and hey, I always want to say Caesura, and I believe I do know your name. Let me say, this is the comment I'm referring. I believe I do know your name, but I've been trying to figure out how to pronounce the screen name, and I'm just gonna go with Caesura. I don't know. Well, I'll continue to think about that one. Case. Hi, Kelly. So Kelly helps organize a lot of the stuff that goes on behind the scenes here. So thank you so much, Kelly, for all the work that you're doing too. Kelly is our project manager on staff. So let's see. Yeah, I think if y'all have any like easy hitter questions, like now's the time, because I don't really have anything else scheduled, and I have an extra minute or two before I was, planning on going down. Say sure. Yeah, okay. I'll try to commit that to memory. Okay. Well, I think I'm going to close it down then. Again, I think that there's some research on some some topics going on right now that I'm wanting to research a little more before I either make a video or make a office hours talk on it. There's the news stories these days are wild. So it's trying to hunt through what's real and what's actually going to affect oil and gas and what's not. That's been the fun part of this job is fun and scary. At the beginning was not having a finance department and accounting department and experts to tell me what to think on oil and gas futures. And Crystal is intent on getting into this video today. So having to research that all myself and having to understand all those markets myself, rather than just theoretically knowing about it and having like the experts in the other department down the hallway tell you the answer. It was kind of scary at first, but now it's kind of fun. So, all right, Jacob, you fit one in right before I signed off. So we will hit it. Okay, so Tracy, as with all investments being high, medium, or low risk, how does an investor find a low risk oil well investment, or at least how do they reduce the risk? Good question. I think the lowest risk oil investment would be spreading the investment across as many producing wells as possible. And there's a couple ways to do that. So you could either invest in there's a couple companies that like pool together money and then they invest in several different properties and then you're an owner of that company or that investment fund. Pros and cons to that. You could invest in a property that has a lot of producing wells on it, whether that's through unitization, pooling, or just a really active area. And so maybe you're just getting a sliver of interest in a section that has like 50 wells on it. Like that's one way. Because really the wells themselves are what provide you the most security and risk management. Getting interest in basins that have a lot of history of continued production and different ways to find that production. So any basin where there's a long history of production, so Permian Basin or any area where there's been a lot of oil and gas for 100 years or so, it's probably because there's a lot of stacked pay and a lot of different opportunities to get your money back a lot of different ways. Whenever you're just focused on like one formation and man, that well in that one formation has to be good or else there goes the opportunity. That's when your risk starts going up quite a bit. Let's see. There was one more way. What was the other way? Oh, the type of investment. So the mix. So if you're able to diversify how much oil and gas you have exposure to, and which basins you have exposure to, because sometimes what happens is certain basins will get basically strangled in terms of like that basin will just have a boom town like situation happening and they'll produce too much oil and gas and all the commodity prices locally for that basin will just go through the floor because there's just too much supply. And so maybe gas prices, like natural gas prices, are doing just fine, but you're in an area where there's too much natural gas and there's just nowhere to sell it. Then that would, even if you have 50 producing wells that are real stable, even then you would have a hard time getting your money back until that area corrects itself, either by adding pipelines, adding capacity, adding some way to take care of that supply. Which honestly, that's from a larger scale is what's happening to the U.S. gas market is we have too much gas and not enough use for it. And if we could figure out how to get it reliably to other markets, other global markets, then that would help stabilize natural gas prices to where we could afford to produce to the full ability that we have. I'm watching what oil prices does with that for that same reason. And NGLs came up earlier today on like how all of that, like what if we had low oil prices, less associated gas from the low oil prices, and then we had a different mix of NGL sources. So like the natural gas liquids, like when we create a barrel or a gallon of gasoline, we can create that a couple different ways based on what's the most efficient way for, like what's the most cost effective way for the plants to create gasoline. Because we're not producing gasoline out of the ground. You have to like combine the exact right components in order to create gasoline that goes in your car, or jet fuel that goes in airplanes, or butane or propane. Like all of that has to be extracted from the natural gas or combined with different sources in order to to combine. So I'm curious to see how that shakes out. Like if anytime we have anything that shakes up the mix of oil and gas, not in the same way. So anytime OPEC plays with oil prices, for example, or a winter storm makes natural gas prices go high, or a new discovery causes X, Y, and Z to change, that shifts the balance of oil and gas sources for like creation of these secondary products. And so, and anything that helps spread that exposure across more things is the lower risk. And then, the closer you get to an actual mineral interest, the lower risk you get also, because as we were talking about earlier, if you have a override, that anything that's tied to the lease, then you have the risk of the lease expiring or something happening to the wells temporarily, even that causes you to lose your interest because that lease expired and they had to get a new lease for the mineral owner and they didn't include you. Like there's things that can happen that you want to protect yourself against, and just having straight up mineral interest is the easiest way to do that. But it is more expensive than an override or an NPRI or a non-op percentage or all the other things you could be picking up. So, and then we're going to finish this one because this is kind of a funny one. What would be an average cost associated to drill and produce your own well? So, I'll start with the cheapest well I can think of. Let's say that you had a 2,000 foot deep formation that you were trying to drill and target, and had a very simple completion that you were trying to put on it. Like all you had to do was put pipe down in the ground and poke a hole in it, basically, right? That's the simplest completion you can do. And poke a hole through perforations. And I use not the right vernacular just to make it easier to understand, but y'all know what I mean. That would be the cheapest completion and the cheapest drilling. And let's just say you're also in the cheapest area to operate. Maybe it's a middle of nowhere, very flat, very unpopulated, very easy to access, easy access to pipelines. Like there's a lot of pipelines and roads, but there's not a lot of like civilian life, for example. Then you're probably looking at about pipe prices have gone up since I last put this ballpark in my head, but I would say 500,000 would be the cheapest you could do it if all those things were like check mark, checking the box. Because some of those, there's cheap drilling rigs, but do you really want to have a cheap drilling rig for, $500,000 investment? You don't want that's always like that premise of you don't want the cheapest thing out there, because you want the second cheapest thing out there at worst, right? There's just that's where you're drilling the wells, completing the wells. There's just so much safety concerns also that there's not just the single well cost that you have to consider, but the what if scenarios. Like, what if we stick the drill pipe? What if we aren't able to, what if we get out of zone? What if we hit something we didn't expect? What if we can't find the reservoir? What if those what if scenarios can add up really quickly? Like the base plan might be 500, but if you hit one of those what if scenarios that goes south, those train wreck scenarios, that's where your $500,000 well could go to be $1 million, $2 million well. And that's really the cheapest I could imagine doing it right now. I'm almost 100% sure someone's doing it for cheaper. But that's realistically, in terms of one of those, an average well that oil and gas, the ones in the news with the fracking technology, those are closer to 5 million to 30 million a well. It really goes up pretty quickly depending on the depth and the length and the completion. So, yeah. To produce your own well, I would probably budget $500 a month or so. I'm sure you can do it cheaper. I know you can. But like I said, the average costs that things will happen over the course of that well. And so when you start averaging that across the life, 500 is probably the lowest that I would assume operating a single well, for example. Like the more wells you can spread that across, the better. Like that overhead and the G&A and the transportation and all those things. But yeah, about 500 is the lowest I'd go. On average, I allocate. If you just told me what does it cost to operate an average well in the U.S., I'd probably throw out a number closer to like $1,000 or $2,000 a month. So, yeah, just in terms of general numbers, that's another way to know if your well is economic or not. If you're not an operator, if you're not a working interest owner, and you're just trying to figure out if the royalties being produced are covering the cost of the well, those are good ranges also, just for anyone else listening. Okay. Well, thank you guys for hopping on, and I'll be doing this again next week. I think if I schedule it, it will be happening. I just hadn't looked at my calendar right before I hopped on. I'm pretty sure that next week I'm still open. We'll just be doing this every week. Yeah. So, all right. Thank you guys for joining, and I'll talk